armored with only their faith, and armed only with deadwood cudgels and other detritus from the shore, the drowned men make surprisingly effective support for followers of the Kraken banner. Their presence in battle signifies the drowned god's blessing, bolstering men to fight past their wounds and strike all the harder against their foes. While few in number, the drowned men's faith is such that they can survive even killing blows. Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name's Brian, and in this video we're going to be talking about a recent release for the Greyjoys in A Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game. So the Drowned Men box comes with, well, it's technically 4 unique sculpts. On each, there's 3 large bases, or solo bases, I guess you could say, and on those bases are 3 unique sculpts on one, right? But then the arrangement of those 3 sculpts gets shifted a little bit from base to base, so it kind of makes them look a little bit different on the table, at least. It's much like the Freedmen for Targaryens. This box also comes with 2 unit attachments, and that would be the Drowned Prophets. So starting off with the Drowned Men, for 4 points we get a solo-based infantry unit that has speed 5, has the melee attack called Cudgel. Sorry, did I say Crudgel in the intro? I don't know. I must have been reading weird. At any rate, they have the Cudgel attack that hits on 5s and only rolls 4 dice. They have a defense save of 6+, and a morale of 4+. They have the Order Drowned God's Blessing, which triggers at the start of any turn. You target 1 friendly Greyjoy infantry unit in short range and choose 1. That unit restores 2 wounds. That unit may reroll any attack dice this turn, or enemies that attack that unit this turn become vulnerable. They also have an innate ability called the Drowned God's Fanatics. This unit has 4 wounds. This unit can only suffer a maximum of 1 wound from failed panic tests, and this unit suffers 1 wound for every 2 unblocked hits from an attack or effect. So before we move on to talk about my thoughts on the Drowned Men right off the bat, I want to hit the Drowned Prophet real quick. The box does come with 2 of these. They're a 2-point infantry attachment that just brings the Order Resilience, and this triggers when an enemy is performing an attack on this unit after the attack dice are rolled. This unit only suffers 1 wound for every 2 unblocked hits. So this is kind of like taking one part of the Drowned God's Fanatics and putting it into an attachment to throw into any of your other units. 2-point attachments are pretty expensive, at least in my opinion. So they're at that point where like 2 points can sometimes, it's either too much or not enough. I don't know if there's a whole lot of like just rights for 2-point attachments, but for the Drowned Prophet, I feel like this might be getting really close to that just right at 2 points, because at 1 point I feel like Resilience is too good of an ability to just throw on whatever infantry unit you want. A lot of the Greyjoy units are typically a little bit more glassy in nature. As I've stated in previous videos, my opinions on Greyjoys are that they do play a very tempo-based game. They like to control the pace of the way the game's unfolding, and I think the Drowned Prophet can help you get there by getting your units to last a little bit longer. Resilience, it's much better to have it innately than have it as just an order, of course, and this is coming from my privileged giant position, but I do think that 2 points to just make sure that a unit sticks around, especially if we're looking at something that really doesn't need a whole lot of help from other things, like maybe Silenced Men or House Harlaw Reapers. Giving them something like a Drowned Prophet can really extend their survivability and adds a lot. It just lets them get to a later point in the game and still be effective. So I think the Drowned Prophet is really, really cool. I don't think it's just a windmill slam into every single unit you have, but I do think that you will see people throwing these on the table if people start pulling back from Expert Duelist a little bit. So getting back to the Drowned Men, this unit is really neat. They are fairly resilient towards panic checks, And even though they only have that 6+ save, that basically having resilience baked into their profile is a pretty amazing piece of tech. Your opponent's gonna have to put a little bit more effort into trying to get rid of this unit, and a lot of their modifiers to do so aren't really going to help them out so much. Like precision doesn't really matter. They don't care about not getting getting a defense save because they only have a 6+. They shrug off sundering, and they're typically not too worried about panic checks because even if you are stacking something like a -4 modifier on these guys, and they do fail, like let's say they fail that one. I think it's like, I can't remember the exact percentage on rolling an 8 on 2d6, but I think it's like in the 40-ish percent of being able to pass. If you do fail, you're only going to be suffering 1 wound from that, regardless of anything that stacks on top of it. So this unit's going to be difficult to get rid of, but I don't think they're going to be the unit that you're putting forward, given that they're hitting on 5s and they only have that 4. They only roll 4 dice. The real thing that you're going to be taking this unit for is, first of all, holding on to objectives. I think that they're really great for babysitting your backfield objectives because, as I'd stated, again, with Greyjoys being more tempo focused, they don't like putting their units that have jobs on objectives in your home field or in your side of the table, right? So having the drowned men just kind of babysit an objective for a small amount of points. This was usually something like maybe the trappers could do this because they aren't very expensive, but again, then you're not leveraging the cool disrupt from them or the trappers implements or whatever that ability is called. But the drowned men can stay back, hold the objective, and then react to whatever seems to be not going your way, right? And this is kind of more that tempo strategy coming in where you can kind of control the pace of the game. When you look at the Drowned God Blessing order, if you feel like a unit is just a little bit away from being able to actually survive or put as much dice as you want to put into an attack, you can heal it 2 wounds if that'll get you into a better spot. If you're stuck in engagement and need to make sure that this combat goes forward, or you put as much damage as you can, then you can re-roll all your attack dice. Vulnerable also will help you get through some armor if you have a unit that might need the extra help. They don't have sundering or whatever, or they do have sundering and you just do not want the unit that they're engaged with to survive. A really big thing here to keep in mind is that this order, especially the vulnerable part, is probably the area where this matters more. It's enemies that are engaged with the unit that you're targeting. You don't have to have the enemy unit within short range, so you can be pretty safe from having the drowned men get messed up in combat and still being able to be effective on the table. So with the drowned men not being an infantry unit that you can attach things to, they don't get any real innate synergies from the Greyjoy attachments, and I don't think there's a list out there for Greyjoys that wouldn't want at least 1 unit of drowned men in there. I can see bringing 2 if you just want to try and maximize some activation economy, but let's take a look at a few things that do synergize with them within the Greyjoy army. So I think one of the first commanders I want to take a look at is going to be Euron Greyjoy, Lord Reaper of Pike. So as an attachment, I don't think he really brings a whole lot to the drowned men in general. I think if we take a look at the Order Sow Discord, that triggers at the start of any turn. You target 1 enemy unit in long range. They roll a morale test with -1 to their roll for each of their destroyed ranks, and then on a failure, they lose all abilities until the end of the round. If your opponent's trying to shake the drowned men off of an objective, there's a chance that you might be able to use Sow Discord to make it a little bit less likely that they're going to do that. I think some of the units that you got to be worried about going into drowned men to make sure they don't get one-shot are definitely going to be charging critical blow accurate hits. So trying to shave some of those off, especially units that do auto hits whenever they charge or something like that, is going to be another thing you want to watch out for. But some of the things that I think really make Euron interesting for this unit is definitely going to be some of his tactics cards. So if we take a look first at Cunning Ploy, This one triggers when a friendly combat unit activates. That unit cannot perform actions this turn. Instead, one other friendly combat unit performs a march or maneuver or retreat action. And then if the unit's Euron's unit before they perform the action, one enemy within long range becomes vulnerable. So the Drowned Men are a perfect target for Cunning Ploy because you really don't need them to do anything. If they get into position where they're able to put out the Drowned God's blessings on other units, or they're sitting on an objective being able to do that, they're a perfect target for Cunning Ploy. They just don't need to be doing anything during the game. And then when we look at Devious Methods, this card lets you kind of pull back other ones that Euron has, or lets you pull back other tactics cards. So being able to get multiple Cunning Ploys to get your army moving around the table the way you need it to be moving around the table is a pretty neat concept with the Drowned Men incorporated into that list. Mind Games is an interesting card that I think I could probably focus more on in a Euron-focused video, because I don't think immediately it does really anything for the Drowned Men. But I do think Euron definitely appreciates having Drowned Men, mostly just for having Cunning Ploy. So taking a look at another commander, I want to focus in on Balon Greyjoy, the Kraken King, a little bit. So Balon's attachment doesn't really do anything for the Drowned Men, like literally doesn't do anything for them. Like, you know, you could argue that Euron could do something in a very like corner case, but with Fueled by Slaughter and Iron Resolve, you're not getting any value out of Balon in the focus of the Drowned Men. Also, the Old Way is one of the cards that Balon brings, and that doesn't really help out the Drowned Men at all either, because they don't get pillage tokens unless you're putting them on them with an NCU or something like that, which I don't think you'd really want to do with the Drowned Men, considering that they don't really care if they get reroll panic dice, and they don't really need to reroll attack dice because they could give it to themselves through the Drowned God's blessings if you were really fishing for it. But the cards that are a little bit more interesting with Balon, for the first one up would be Price of Failure. So this triggers when a friendly unit's performing an attack before the attack dice are rolled. All attack dice rolls automatically hit for the attack, and then for each roll that would have missed, the attacker suffers 1 wound. So this is just if you're fishing for some hits, like you need 4 dice to hit on the side or something to get, you know, the most out of triggering a panic test or removing a model. That is Price of Failure is something. Now you could very much get into the position where if you miss with everything, the Drowned Men just blow up and die. So that would not be great. But I think Price of Failure at least has some interesting play on the Drowned Men, because if you really did need to get those 4 hits through, or if your opponent's not respecting them so much, and then you play Price of Failure on a charge with these guys, I think that it actually is pretty... It could be a point in the game that kind of turns things in your favor. So I think Price of Failure is interesting, at least with Balon, in terms of the Drowned Men. The real big one here is Acceptable Sacrifices. This triggers at the start of a friendly turn. You target one combat unit other than Balon Greyjoy's unit and attach this card to them until the end of the game. While attached, this unit suffers +1 wound from failing panic tests, and all other units in short range gain +1 to their panic test rolls. When this unit's destroyed, you target one friendly unit within long range, and they restore 2 wounds, and if they have the pillage ability, they gain a pillage token. So this is a perfect target for, or the Drowned Men are a perfect target for Acceptable Sacrifices. You get to keep them back and keep them in a support role. Greyjoy morale is not anything to really write home about. They don't have the greatest in a lot of their cheaper units. Some of the units are really good with morale, but for the most part, you're not really tilting super hard into protecting yourself against panic. But with Acceptable Sacrifices, the Drowned Men are not likely to be in combat anytime soon if you're kind of keeping them back so that they can influence the units in front of them with the Drowned God's blessings. When you do want to unpack them and make them a nuisance for your opponent, that's when you can go off and charge them out. This is where you have to really balance how the victory points are looking for the game, because if you're willing to just let these guys go and take one for the team, your opponent kills them, and then you get to do restore wounds and also gain pillage tokens. This is really nice for things that might spend pillage tokens on things, or spend pillage tokens for effects. So I think that the the drowned men do some really neat stuff with acceptable sacrifices. Also, with failing taking +1 wound for failed panic tests, I'm pretty sure that the Drowned God Fanatic's innate ability stops them from actually taking those extra wounds. So you're really not losing anything off of having one or having the added wound from failing panic tests. So I think that Balon definitely will want at least one of these guys so that he can have a good target for acceptable sacrifices, and then just gets a little bit more value out of Price of Failure. So the final commander that I want to talk about is going to be Dagmar Cleftjaw, Master at Arms. He has the Order Martial training, which just triggers when this unit's performing a melee attack before rolling attack dice. You can roll any attack dice, and the defender becomes vulnerable. Not a whole lot of value there with the drowned men, but the other thing he brings is Gang Up. And Gang Up just states that all friendly units' melee attacks gain +1 to hit and +1 attack die on enemies that are engaged with this unit, and at least one other friendly unit. So this could be something like Dagmar's unit goes in, then the drowned men can come in, and since Gang Up's there, they get to roll 5 dice and hit on 4s instead of hitting on 5s. Same thing with Dagmar's unit. You could just kind of get the drowned men in there, engage them, and still be able to get Gang Up bonus for it. It's just easy Gang Up fodder. Sometimes I think Gang Up can be, I don't know, from a free folk standpoint, I don't have a problem managing Gang Up, but I can see some people might have some problems that aren't used to playing with a lot of the full-size bases to try and trigger Gang Up. But the Drowned Men are a cheap way to do that if you're not interested in trying to bring multiple Ironborn trappers or bowmen, which bowmen don't really do that for you anyways. You don't want them triggering Gang Up. That's just silly. But I think that the Drowned Men also help out Dagmar in general. There is an interesting conversation, and the main reason why I wanted to bring up Dagmar in this one, and that's going to be coordination tactics. This triggers at the start of any turn. You target 2 friendly infantry units within short range of each other. Until the end of the turn, both units gain any abilities on each other's card, and then you can also immediately trigger any unused start of the turn order on either of those units. So the Drowned God's Blessings is a start of the turn order, so you could use that on the unit that gains the ability. The reason why I really wanted to talk about this a bit was because of the weird... Currently, there's no clear decision on how the interaction with innate abilities work, especially when there's a health total kind of tied to it. So I think the way that most people would end up playing this is that the unit that is not the Drowned Men would end up gaining the only suffer a maximum of 1 wound from failing panic tests, and would also gain the only suffers 1 wound for every 2 unblocked hits from an attacker effect, but then would not gain this unit has 4 wounds and then just wipe out half a tray when it or 2/3 of a tray when you end up putting this ability on them. I think that Cool Mini or Not does need to respond to this one. I don't know if it's ever really like come up before in terms of innate abilities. I think maybe it came up in Giants, and there might be an FAQ out there that addresses it, but I haven't dug in deep enough to see if it's out there. But for me, coordination tactics is really nice for Dagmar if it works the way that I expect it to be working, where you could go ahead and basically stamp a unit with resilience and only suffering 1 wound from failed panic tests. So I think he definitely, if you're wanting to play a wide Dagmar list, which I think most of them would want to be wide in terms of number of bodies and activations, having a unit or 2 of Drowned Men would be really nice for him. Also, if you're a person who likes discussing rules and intentions and as written, innate abilities are really interesting, especially when we look at this coordination tactics here, because innate abilities state that they can't be lost by any effect or ability. And one could say that if you're gaining the innate ability from coordination tactics, that coordination tactics can't take it away. So I know that might start a little bit of a fire in the comments section. I also kind of have the same idea about attachments that bring innate abilities, because the attachment is considered to transfer that ability to the unit while it's in the unit, but then innate abilities can't be taken away at all from an effect or ability So, I mean, it's an interesting discussion nonetheless. I think innate abilities just need a little bit more exploration from Kumini or Not's development team, but something to scratch your head on. Like I said, I probably would not say that they get to keep it indefinitely, and I wouldn't say that they get the wound characteristic from whatever they're taking the ability from, so that's definitely... I'm not trying to bark up that tree. Probably one of the final things that we can touch on are outside attachments, and I think a lot of the same reasons why Dagmar gets interesting with the Drowned Men is one of the same reasons why Asha Greyjoy, Lady Greyjoy, the attachment version, I'd call her Asha 2, the attachment, why she gets a little bit interesting too. She has the, for 2 points, she brings the Order Sentinel that triggers after another friendly unit in long range is attacked. This unit performs one charge or maneuver action, and if charging, it must target the attacker. She also brings Gang Up, so all friendly units' melee attacks gain +1 to hit and +1 attack die on enemies that are engaged with this unit and at least one other friendly. So this is another, like, you can try and bait your opponent into triggering off Sentinel and making sure that when they charge into the Drowned Men, hoping to take them down, which hopefully they don't because you're playing things, in a way to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then Asha comes in with the Sentinel Order, getting the +1 to hit for Gang Up. Maybe the Drowned Men haven't activated yet, and they can take advantage of Gang Up later as well. It's just an interesting thing to bring her along because I think there's definitely, like, Asha Greyjoy, of course, has an opportunity cost and a hefty one at that, where you don't get to take the Warcry version of her. But this is just a thing that can mess with the Drowned Men a little bit too. My final attachment to talk about would probably be Jaqen H'ghar, and that's only because Greyjoy lists are, if you're out there in the know in terms of like shenanigans that Greyjoys can pull, there's the whole like 3 or 4 Victorian attachments that you can get during a game. And since Greyjoy lists would probably have something like that in there, if you're leaning into it, of course, having a Drowned Prophet probably isn't the worst thing either, because then Jaqen could turn into a Drowned Prophet himself for the cost of 1 point and the loss of whatever unit the Drowned Man or the Drowned Prophet was in already. So I think that kind of rounds out my discussion of this box release. I think it's really interesting and brings a cool, unique tool to the Greyjoy tackle box, so to speak, and I'm looking forward to getting a couple more of them into my Greyjoy lists and just kind of throwing down in general. I've been really looking for a good pairing for my Roose Bolton, like -5 panic test Greyjoy list, and I think having something where the Drowned Men get put into it to kind of offer up a different build is something that I'm really looking forward to experimenting with in a 2-list pairing. So let me know how you feel like you're going to use these things in your games, and if you think, I'm especially looking forward to seeing any kind of conversations about the rules, because as soon as things get a little bit more open for interpretation, that's when some weird stuff can start coming up. So again, I look forward to seeing those conversations as well. So otherwise, thanks for watching the video here, and we'll catch you in the next one.